December 1974, Fort Worth, Texas. Three girls walked into a crowded Christmas mall and vanished without anyone seeing a thing. Days later, a letter arrived saying they ran away, but police proved it was fake, written by someone who knew secrets about their lives. How do three people disappear in front of hundreds of witnesses, and who cared enough to lie about it? Seminary South Shopping Center sat like a giant box of light and noise in Fort Worth, Texas. It was December 23rd, 1974, 2 days before Christmas. Inside, hundreds of people pushed through the halls. They carried shopping bags. They stood in long lines. Christmas music played from speakers in the ceiling. The smell of popcorn and perfume mixed in the warm air. Kids pressed their faces against store windows. Parents checked their watches. Everyone was busy. Everyone was in a hurry. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, three girls walked through the main entrance. Rachel Trollinger was 17 years old. She had brown hair and drove her own car. Renee Wilson was 14. She was Rachel's best friend. They had known each other for years. With them was Renee's little sister, Julie Ann Mosley. Julie was only 9 years old. She wore her best clothes because going to the mall was special. The girls were there to shop for Christmas presents. They had money in their pockets. They had lists of people to buy gifts for. They were excited. This is the Fort Worth missing trio case. These three girls are the ones who vanished. This story is about what happened that day and all the days after when no one could find them. The mall was packed. It was the biggest shopping day before Christmas. The parking lot was almost full when the girls arrived. Rachel had to drive around looking for a space. Cars filled every row. People walked between the cars carrying boxes and bags. The sun was still up, but it would get dark soon. December days are short. By 6 o'clock, the sky starts turning gray. The girls had a plan. They would split up and shop. Rachel needed to buy something for her parents. Renee wanted to find a gift for a friend. Little Julie went with them, looking at everything with big eyes. The mall had 2 floors. It had more than 100 stores. There were toy stores and clothing stores and jewelry stores. There were places that sold records and places that sold candy. For a 9-year-old girl, it was like a wonderland. They agreed to meet back at a certain time, in 6:30. That was when Renee and Julie's mother would pick them up. She would drive to the main entrance and wait. The girls would come out and get in the car and go home. It was a simple plan. They had done it before. There was no reason to think anything would go wrong, but 6:30 came and the girls did not come out. Their mother sat in her car. She waited 5 minutes, then 10 minutes. The parking lot was busy. Cars pulled in and out. People walked past. She watched the doors. She did not see the girls. 15 minutes passed. 20 minutes. She started to feel worried. This was not like them. Renee and Julie were good kids. They did not make their mother wait. They always came when they said they would. She got out of her car and went inside. The mall was still crowded. She walked through the main hall, looking for 3 familiar faces. She checked the stores where she thought they might be. She asked a few workers if they had seen 3 girls. Nobody had seen them. The mall was too big and too full of people. Finding 3 girls was like looking for 3 drops of water in a lake. By 7 o'clock, the mother was scared. She found a phone and called home. Maybe the girls had called there. Maybe they had gotten a ride with someone else. But no one had heard from them. No one knew where they were. She called Rachel's parents. They had not seen the girls either. Now, Everyone was worried. The police were called. Officers came to the mall. They walked through the stores. They asked questions. They checked the bathrooms. They looked in the parking lot. The girl's car was still there. Like Rachel's car sat in its parking space exactly where she had left it. The doors were locked. Nothing inside was missing. The car had not been touched. The girls had brought purses. They had brought money. They had brought their shopping lists. All of that was gone with them. But there were no signs of trouble. No one had heard screaming. No one had seen a fight. No one had noticed 3 girls being forced into another car. In a mall full of hundreds of people, the 3 girls had simply stopped existing. Police talked to store workers. They talked to shoppers who were still there. They asked if anyone saw anything strange. Did anyone see 3 girls who looked scared? Did anyone see a man following them? Did anyone see them leave with someone? Every answer was no. No one remembered seeing them at all. The Christmas crowds were too thick. Everyone was focused on their own shopping. 3 girls in a sea of people were invisible. The first night was terrible for the families. They called everyone they knew. They drove around Fort Worth looking. They checked the girls' favorite places. They called the hospital to see if there had been an accident. They found nothing. It was like the girls had been erased. Police started with the most common idea. They thought the girls had run away. Teenagers do that sometimes. They get mad at their parents, or they want an adventure. They pack a bag and leave. Maybe Rachel had a boyfriend no one knew about. Maybe the 3 of them planned to go somewhere for a few days. Maybe they would come home soon feeling silly and sorry. But that idea fell apart fast. Rachel was a good student. She had plans for college. She was not the type to run away. Renee was 14 and responsible. She loved her family. And Julie was only 9 years old. 9-year-olds do not run away to start new lives. They want their beds and their toys and their mothers. Julie had no reason to leave. She had everything a little girl needed right at home. The girls had left Christmas presents behind. Presents they had already bought. Presents they were excited to give. They had left their clothes and their favorite things. Rachel had left money in her room. The families knew something was very wrong. Their daughters had not run away. Something bad had happened. On December 25th, Christmas Day, when the girls should have been opening presents, the families were sick with fear. Then on December 27th, something strange happened. A letter arrived. It was addressed to Rachel's parents. The handwriting looked like Rachel's. The letter said the girls were fine. It said they had decided to leave town for a while. It said not to worry. It said they would be in touch soon. For one moment, the families felt relief. Rachel had written. She was alive. The girls were okay. But then they looked closer. Something was wrong with the letter. The words were right, but the feeling was wrong. Rachel's mother read it again and again. She knew her daughter's handwriting. She knew how Rachel talked. This letter looked like Rachel's writing, but something about it felt off. It felt like someone was trying to sound like Rachel, but not quite getting it right. The families took the letter to the police. Police sent it to experts who study handwriting. These experts looked at every letter, every curve, every line. They compared it to real samples of Rachel's writing. They used special tools and tests. After days of study, they gave their answer. Rachel did not write this letter. Someone else wrote it. Someone had tried to copy her handwriting. Someone had tried to make it look real, but it was fake. This changed everything. Someone out there knew the girls were missing. Someone had taken the time to write a fake letter. Someone wanted the police to think the girls had run away on purpose. Someone wanted everyone to stop looking, and that someone knew details about Rachel's life. They knew how she wrote. They knew enough to make the letter almost believable. The person who wrote that letter knew things they should not know. That meant they had been watching. That meant they had been planning. That meant this was not random, and someone had taken these girls on purpose, and now they were trying to cover it up. The investigation started over from the beginning. Police now knew this was not a runaway case. This was an abduction. 3 girls had been taken. The fake letter proved it. But who took them? And how did they disappear from a crowded mall without anyone seeing? Detectives went back to Seminary South Shopping Center. They walked the same paths the girls had walked. They tried to understand the timeline. The girls arrived at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The last confirmed sighting was around 6 o'clock. A store worker remembered seeing 3 girls who matched their description looking at items in a shop. The worker was almost certain it was them. That meant the girls were alive and safe at 6 o'clock. They vanished sometime in the next 30 minutes. 30 minutes, that was the window. In 30 minutes, 3 girls went from shopping and talking to gone. The mall had many exits. There were main doors and side doors and doors that led to different parts of the parking lot. Security cameras existed in 1974, but not many stores had them. The cameras that did exist were old and the footage was grainy. Police checked every camera they could find. They saw crowds of people. They saw dozens of families and teenagers. But they could not find clear images of Rachel, Renee, and Julie. The girls blended into the crowd, and then they were gone. The parking lot was huge. It held hundreds of cars. Police searched it section by section. They looked for any sign of struggle. They looked for dropped items. They looked for anything the girls might have left behind. They found nothing. Rachel's car sat untouched. The doors were locked. Inside, everything was normal. The keys were not in the car. Rachel must have had them with her when she disappeared. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people. They talked to every store worker who was on duty that day. They tracked down shoppers who had been at the mall. They put notices in the newspaper asking witnesses to come forward. They set up a phone line for tips. Calls came in, but none of them helped. People thought they saw the girls here or there. People thought they remembered something. But when police checked, the stories fell apart. Memories were fuzzy. The mall had been too crowded. No one had clear, useful information. The Fort Worth Police Department worked the case hard at first. They filed reports. They followed leads. But as weeks passed with no breaks, the case started to go cold. Detectives had other crimes to solve. Other cases came in. The girls were not forgotten, but the active searching slowed down. The families could feel it happening. They could see police paying less attention. It made them angry and desperate. The families refused to give up. They made posters with the girls' faces. They hung them all over Fort Worth. They went on local television and begged for information. Rachel's mother cried on camera and asked whoever took her daughter to please bring her home. Renee and Julie's mother did the same. The faces of 3 smiling girls were suddenly everywhere. On telephone poles, in store windows, on the evening news. Private investigators were hired. The families pooled their money. They brought in people who had experience with missing persons, while these investigators did their own interviews. They went over the same ground the police had covered. They were looking for anything that had been missed. They talked to the girl's friends. They talked to neighbors. They built profiles of Rachel, Renee, and Julie. They wanted to know if anyone strange had been in their lives. Had anyone been paying too much attention? Had anyone been asking questions? One thing became clear. The girls were normal. They had normal lives. They went to school. They had friends. They went to church. There were no suspicious characters hanging around. No creepy neighbor. No stranger following them. Their lives were ordinary and safe right up until the moment they were not. The fake letter haunted everyone. Who wrote it? Handwriting experts said it was someone who had practiced, that someone who had studied Rachel's writing. That took time. That took access. Where would someone get samples of Rachel's handwriting? Maybe from school. Maybe from letters she had sent. Maybe from notes she had passed to friends. Someone had been close enough to collect these things without anyone noticing. Police looked at everyone in the girls' lives. They questioned family members. They questioned teachers. They questioned boys the girls knew. They questioned friends and neighbors. Everyone was checked. Everyone had to account for where they were on December 23rd. Most people had alibis. They had been at work or at home with family. The few who did not have solid alibis were investigated further. Nothing pointed to any of them. No evidence linked anyone to the disappearance. The FBI joined the case in January of 1975. When multiple minors go missing across state lines, it becomes a federal matter. FBI agents brought more resources. They checked bus stations and train stations. They checked airports. Had anyone seen 3 girls traveling together? Had anyone bought tickets for them? The answer was always no. If the girls had left Texas, they had done it without leaving a trail. Phone records were checked. In 1974, not everyone had a phone in their home, but most did. Police looked at calls made from the girls' houses. They looked at calls made to the girls' houses. They were searching for any pattern, any repeated number, any sign that someone had been in contact with the girls before they vanished. They found nothing unusual, just normal calls to normal people. Credit cards were not as common in 1974 as they are now, but some people had them. Rachel did not have a credit card. None of the girls did. They had cash. But cash does not leave a trail. If someone used cash to buy food or gas or a motel room, there was no way to track it. The girls could have been driven anywhere in the country and no one would know. Searches expanded outside the city. Police and volunteers walked through fields. They checked abandoned buildings. They searched parks and wooded areas. They were looking for bodies. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone was thinking it. If the girls had been killed, where were they? Texas is a big state with a lot of empty land. A person could hide something out there, and it might never be found. Months went by. Winter turned to spring. Spring turned to summer. The case stayed open, but there were no new leads. The families kept hoping. They kept the posters up. They kept calling the police. They kept believing that somehow, somewhere, the girls were alive and would come home. Then someone had a new idea. What if the person who took the girls was not from Fort Worth? What if it was someone passing through? Someone who saw 3 girls and made a quick, terrible decision. Police started looking at criminals who had been in Texas in December of 1974. They made lists of known kidnappers. They made lists of violent offenders. They checked to see if any of these people had been near Fort Worth on December 23rd. This opened up new possibilities, but also new problems. There were many dangerous people in Texas. There were many people with bad records. Checking them all took time. And even when police found someone suspicious, they had no evidence, no witnesses, no physical proof. The case was a puzzle with missing pieces. One theory that kept coming up was that the girls had been taken by someone they trusted, someone they knew. That would explain why there was no struggle. If a familiar person said, "Hey, come with me to my car for a minute," the girls might have gone. Rachel might have thought it was safe. She might have brought Renee and Julie along. They would have walked out of the mall calmly. No one would have noticed anything wrong. But who? Who did all three girls trust enough to follow? Police went through the list again. Family friends, teachers, coaches, church members, people who worked at places the girls went. Everyone was looked at. Everyone was questioned. And everyone seemed innocent. But the fake letter became the center of everything. Whoever wrote it was involved. That was certain. Police brought in more handwriting experts. They studied the letter word by word. The paper it was written on was normal, the kind anyone could buy at any store. The envelope was normal too. The postmark showed it had been mailed from Fort Worth. That meant the person who wrote it was still in the area days after the girls vanished. Or they had given the letter to someone else to mail. By the end of 1975, the case was cold. 1 full year had passed. The families were broken. They had no answers. The police had no suspects. The FBI had no leads. 3 girls had walked into a mall and disappeared like smoke. The fake letter sat in an evidence box, the only real clue, and it pointed to no one. Like the question that nobody could answer kept echoing. How do you make 3 people vanish in front of hundreds of witnesses? And the darker question underneath it. Who knows you well enough to fake your handwriting, but hates you enough to take you away forever? Before the girls vanished, Fort Worth was a place where parents felt safe. Kids walked to school alone. Teenagers went to the mall without worry. Mothers dropped their children off and picked them up later. The world felt smaller and friendlier. People trusted their neighbors. They trusted public spaces. Shopping centers were supposed to be safe. After December 23, 1974, everything changed. Parents held their children's hands tighter. They watched strangers with suspicion. The mall was no longer just a place to buy things. It was the place where 3 girls disappeared. Some families stopped going there. The bright lights and Christmas music could not erase what had happened. Fear had moved in, and it never left. Stories started to spread. Other parents in Fort Worth came forward with strange experiences. A woman said a man had tried to talk to her daughter in a parking lot. Another family said someone had followed their car. These things might have happened before the girls went missing, but no one had paid attention. Now, every strange look felt dangerous. Every unfamiliar person felt like a threat. Police received hundreds of tips. Most led nowhere. Someone would call and say they saw 3 girls in another city. Police would check and find it was not them. Someone else would say they knew who did it. Police would investigate and find no evidence. Our dead ends piled up like fallen leaves. The media covered the story heavily at first. Local newspapers put the girls' faces on the front page. Television news showed their pictures every night. Reporters interviewed the families. They interviewed police. They interviewed anyone connected to the case. But as months passed with no breaks, the coverage slowed. Other news took over. The girls faded from the front page. The families felt forgotten. Then something happened that made people pay attention again. In other parts of Texas, girls started going missing. Not from malls, but from other public places, from parks, from neighborhoods. Some of these cases were solved, some were not. People started to wonder if there was a connection. Was someone moving around Texas taking young girls? Was the Fort Worth case part of a bigger pattern? Police looked into it. They compared cases. They looked for similarities. Some cases seemed possibly related. Others did not fit. The problem was that, in the 1970s, police departments did not share information well. Each city worked its own cases. There was no big computer system connecting everything. If a man took a girl in Houston and then drove to Fort Worth and took 3 more girls, no one would know they were connected unless someone noticed by chance. Theories multiplied. Some people thought the girls had been taken by a serial killer. In the 1970s, the concept of serial killers was just becoming widely known. People were learning that some criminals killed again and again. Maybe someone like that had taken Rachel, Renee, and Julie. Maybe they were dead within hours of disappearing. Maybe their bodies were buried somewhere in the Texas wilderness. Other people thought it was a trafficking ring, groups that kidnapped young people and sold them or forced them to work. These groups existed. They were rare, but they were real. Maybe the girls had been taken out of state. Maybe they had been transported far away. Maybe they were alive but trapped. This theory gave families a strange kind of hope. If the girls were alive somewhere, maybe they could still be rescued. Some theories were darker. Whispers went around about cults, about groups that took people for rituals or experiments. These theories had no evidence, but they spread anyway. Fear makes people imagine terrible things. Police reports from the time show the frustration investigators felt. And one detective wrote that the case was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. Another wrote that it felt like the girls had stepped through a door into another world. The language in these reports grew more hopeless as time went on. After checking every lead, after interviewing every person, after searching every field, they had nothing. The families tried to keep attention on the case. They held vigils on the anniversary of the disappearance. They gave interviews whenever reporters would listen. They never stopped believing the girls could be found. But hope is heavy to carry. Year after year, with no news, wore them down. Renee and Julie's mother aged fast. Photos from before the disappearance show a smiling woman with smooth skin. Photos from 5 years later show someone who looked 20 years older. Her eyes were tired. Her face was tight with grief. Rachel's parents were the same. The not knowing was worse than knowing. At least if they had found bodies, there would be an ending. The families could have buried their daughters and mourned. Instead, they lived in a constant state of waiting. Every phone call might be news. Every knock on the door might be police with information. But the calls and knocks brought nothing. Some witnesses who had been at the mall that day started changing their stories. A woman who said she saw nothing in 1974 called police in 1977 and said she remembered seeing 3 girls getting into a van. But when police questioned her closely, her memory fell apart. She admitted she might have seen it on a different day. She might have imagined it. Memories are tricky. When you want to help, your brain sometimes invents things. One man came forward and said he knew who took the girls. He said it was his neighbor. Police investigated the neighbor thoroughly. They searched his house. They questioned him for hours. The man had no connection to the girls. He had been at work on December 23rd with witnesses to prove it. The person who accused him was mentally ill and confused, but the neighbor's life was damaged. People in his neighborhood thought he was guilty. He had to move away. This happened several times. People would accuse others based on nothing, based on a feeling or a rumor. Innocent people became suspects in the eyes of their communities. The case poisoned relationships and ruined lives even beyond the three girls. In the 1980s, new forensic techniques became available. DNA testing was developed. Police went back to old evidence hoping new science could help. But there was no DNA evidence in the Fort Worth case. No blood, no hair, no body, nothing to test. The new technology could not help them. During this time, several serial killers were caught in Texas and other states. Each time, police would question them about the Fort Worth girls. Did you take them? Do you know what happened? Most said no. A few confessed to the crime, but their confessions were proven false. Some criminals confess to crimes they did not commit. They want attention. They want to seem more dangerous than they are. Police learned to check every confession carefully. One killer seemed like a real possibility. He had been in Fort Worth in December of 1974. He had a history of violence against young women. Police questioned him multiple times. He denied any involvement. They had no evidence to connect him, just the fact that he had been in the right place at the right time. That was not enough. He died in prison years later, taking his secrets with him if he had any. The fake letter never stopped being strange. Over the years, many people looked at it. Handwriting experts, psychologists, criminal profilers. Everyone agreed it showed planning. Whoever wrote it had thought ahead. They knew the letter would buy them time. While police treated the case as a runaway situation, the real criminal was getting away. By the time the letter was proven fake, the trail was ice cold. Some experts said the letter showed the person cared about the girls in a twisted way. They were trying to make the families feel better, trying to give them hope that their daughters were okay. Other experts said the opposite. They said the letter was cruel. It was meant to torture the families with false hope. No one could agree. The most terrifying detail that emerged over years of investigation was this. The person who took the girls knew them. Not just knew of them, knew them well. Well enough to study Rachel's handwriting. Well enough to know details about their lives. Well enough that the girls trusted them. And this person was never identified. That meant they were still out there, still free, still living a normal life while three families lived in agony. 40 years passed, 50 years passed. The girls would be in their 60s now if they were alive. The case remained open. Tips still came in occasionally. Someone would say they saw a woman who looked like Rachel. Police would check. It was never her. The world had moved on, but the families could not. The scariest fact of all sat at the center of the case like a black hole. In a mall full of people, in broad daylight, during the busiest shopping season of the year, 3 girls were taken and no one saw it happen. That should be impossible. But it happened, which meant someone knew exactly how to be invisible. Someone had practiced or planned or gotten incredibly lucky. And that someone understood how to make people disappear perfectly. Today, 50 years after Rachel, Renee, and Julie walked into Seminary South Shopping Center, the case is still officially open. The files sit in a Fort Worth police storage room. They are thick with reports and interviews and dead-end leads. New detectives look at them sometimes. They read through the old notes, hoping to see something that was missed. So far, no one has. The case status is cold, but not closed. In police language, that means there are no active leads, but if new information comes in, it will be investigated. The families have been told this many times. It is meant to be comforting. It mostly feels empty. The Fort Worth missing trio case changed how America thought about public safety. It was one of the early cases that made parents realize their children were not safe everywhere. Shopping malls started adding more security, more cameras, more guards. Amber Alert systems were created years later, partly because of cases like this one. When a child goes missing now, information spreads instantly. Phones buzz, billboards light up, highways show messages. None of that existed in 1974. Laws changed too. The way police handle missing children cases is different now. No more assuming kids just ran away. No more waiting 24 hours to start searching. Every missing child is treated as urgent from the first minute. The Fort Worth girls were part of the reason for that change. Their case showed what happens when precious time is wasted. The families have been broken by time and grief. Judy Mosley, Julie's mother, spent decades searching. She contacted psychics. She followed every possible lead, no matter how thin. She appeared on television shows about unsolved mysteries. She never gave up hope that somehow Julie was alive. Judy died in 2010 without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. That is 36 years of not knowing. 36 years of going to bed every night with the same questions. Rachel's mother was the same. She kept Rachel's room exactly as it had been. The clothes still hung in the closet. The bed was still made. Photos stayed on the walls. She died in the early 2000s, also without answers. Both mothers went to their graves carrying the weight of their missing daughters. Other family members are still alive. They are old now. They still hope for information. They still answer the phone when police call. But the calls are rare. Years go by between them. The detectives who worked the case in the beginning are retired or dead. The investigation has passed through multiple generations of police. Young officers who were not even born in 1974 now read the files and shake their heads. They cannot understand how 3 people vanished so completely. They run the old evidence through new databases. They check old suspects against new information. Nothing connects. Seminary South Shopping Center, the place where it all happened, does not exist anymore. The mall struggled in the 1990s. Stores closed. Customers went elsewhere. By 2002, the mall shut down completely. It sat empty for 2 years. Then it was demolished, torn down, turned into rubble. Now a different kind of shopping area sits on that land. Modern stores, big parking lots. No one shopping there knows that 50 years ago, 3 girls disappeared from that exact spot. The ground remembers, but the people do not. Some things we still do not know, and probably never will. We do not know if the girls were taken together or one at a time. We do not know if they were taken from inside the mall or from the parking lot. We do not know if they were alive for hours, days, weeks, or years after they vanished. We do not know if their bodies are buried somewhere, or if they died in a way that left nothing to find. We do not know if one person took them, or if it was multiple people. We do not know if it was random or planned. We do not know who wrote the fake letter. That person is probably still alive, unless they died of natural causes. They are out there somewhere. Maybe they think about what they did. Maybe they have nightmares. Or maybe they have forgotten. Maybe it was just another Tuesday for them. the case connects to modern disappearances in painful ways. Every year, hundreds of people vanish in the United States. Some are found, many are not. The Fort Worth missing trio reminds us that not every mystery gets solved. Not every family gets closure. Some questions have no answers. There is something deeply wrong about how perfectly the girls disappeared. It suggests knowledge, planning, someone who understood how to exploit the chaos of a crowded mall. Someone who knew that in a sea of strangers, no one pays attention to three girls walking toward an exit. We want to believe that crimes leave evidence, that bad people make mistakes, that justice eventually wins. But this case shows the opposite. Sometimes bad people are smart. Sometimes they do not make mistakes. Sometimes they get away with it forever. The families have said in interviews that the not knowing is torture. If the girls are dead, the families cannot mourn properly. If the girls are alive, the families cannot stop hoping and searching. They are frozen in time, stuck in December of 1974. Every Christmas is a reminder. Every year that passes is another year without answers. What this case teaches us is uncomfortable. It teaches us that the world is not always fair, that bad things happen to good people for no reason, that someone can destroy multiple lives and never face punishment. It teaches us that being careful is not enough. Rachel, Renee, and Julie were not doing anything wrong. They were shopping, they were together, they were in a public place during daylight. They did everything right, and it did not matter. The case also teaches us about the limits of knowledge. We have police, we have investigators, we have science and technology, and we have thousands of people trying to solve this mystery for 50 years. And we still have nothing. There are things we cannot know, facts that are lost to time, secrets that died with whoever holds them. People ask why this case matters after so long. Why keep talking about three girls who disappeared 50 years ago? The answer is simple. Because they deserve to be remembered. Because their families deserve to have their pain acknowledged. Because somewhere, someone knows what happened. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people know this story, that person will talk. Or someone who knows that person will realize what they know and come forward. But 50 years is a long time. Most people who were adults in 1974 are elderly or dead now. Memories fade. Evidence degrades. The chances of solving this case shrink with every passing year. Still, the case file stays open. The girls' photos are still in databases. If human remains are found anywhere in Texas, they are checked against Rachel, Renee, and Julie. If someone confesses to a crime, they are asked about the Fort Worth girls. The system has not forgotten them, even if the public has. The question that haunts everyone who studies this case is simple and terrible. What happened in those 30 minutes? Between 6 o'clock, when the girls were seen shopping, and 6:30 when they were supposed to meet their ride, something occurred that changed everything. 30 minutes. Less time than it takes to watch a television show. In that tiny window of time, 3 lives ended or changed forever. 3 families were destroyed. A community lost its innocence. Whoever took them knew exactly what they were doing. They moved fast. They left no evidence. They thought ahead enough to write a fake letter. That level of control is rare. It suggests this was not their first crime, or that they are naturally very smart and very dangerous. The fake letter is the key to everything. It is the one piece of evidence that proves intention. Someone cared enough to write it. Someone wanted the families to believe a lie. Why? Was it mercy? Was it cruelty? Was it just to buy time? We will probably never know. The most disturbing thought is this. The person who did this might have lived a completely normal life afterward. They might have a family, a job, friends. They might have watched the news reports about the missing girls and felt nothing. Or they might have felt satisfaction. They got away with it. They were smarter than the police, smarter than the FBI, smarter than everyone. And they are still out there, somewhere, unless they are dead. But even if they are dead, the truth died with them. The girls are still gone. The families still have no answers. This is the legacy of the Fort Worth missing trio. Not a solved case, not justice, not closure, just questions that echo through 50 years. Just pain that never heals. Just three faces on old posters that yellow and fade, but never quite disappear. What happens to people when they vanish? Where do they go? The universe does not answer. The world keeps turning. Christmas comes every year. Malls fill with shoppers. Parents drop off their teenagers and drive away and pick them up later. Most of the time, everything is fine. But sometimes it is not. And when it is not, we learn that some people can disappear so completely, it is like they were never there at all. The only proof they existed is the emptiness they left behind, and the people who still love them and wait for them and will never stop waiting, even though 50 years have taught them that waiting is hopeless. The question remains, how does someone vanish in front of hundreds of people? And the question underneath that one, the one that keeps families awake at night. If it happened to them, could it happen to anyone?